Have you ever felt like business is just this brutal zero-sum game? A bloody fight for every scrap of market share, where for you to win, somebody else has to lose. Well, today, we're diving into a pretty radical idea from the book Blue Ocean Strategy. And it's not about how to compete harder, it's about how to make your rivals completely irrelevant by creating a whole new market where you're the only one swimming.
Does this feel a little too familiar? That feeling of constantly looking over your shoulder, battling for every single customer, and just fighting tooth and nail over a shrinking pool of profits? It is an exhausting place to be, and honestly, it's where most businesses live. But what if there was an escape route?
So, it really boils down to the two fundamental choices you see here. On the left, you've got the red ocean. This is business as usual, right? It's that crowded, bloody battleground where everyone is fighting over the same customers. But on the right, that's the blue ocean. Vast, deep, and wide open. An uncontested market space that you create by making the competition a non-issue.
So let's first talk about this trap that so many businesses find themselves in. The authors call it the red ocean. And trust me, that name is no accident. It's meant to conjure up this image of waters turning red from the bloody, relentless fight for survival.
You see, in a red ocean, all the rules are already set. Everybody knows the market boundaries, and they just fight like crazy over the same limited pool of customers. This constant pressure, this head-to-head competition, it forces products to become commodities, where pretty soon the only weapon you have left is price. And you know where that leads, right? Yep. Shrinking profit margins for absolutely everyone.
So how in the world do you escape? Well, you don't fight harder. You chart a completely new course. You set sail for that wide-open blue ocean. And this isn't just about finding some tiny little niche. No, this is about creating an entirely new market where the old rules they don't even apply anymore. The classic example, and it is a brilliant one, is Cirque du Soleil. Back in the 80s, the traditional circus industry was dying. All these rivals were fighting over a shrinking audience of families with young kids. Cirque du Soleil just sidestepped that whole battle. They targeted adults, corporate clients, and they blended the art of the circus with the sophistication of theater. They got rid of the expensive star performers and the animal acts, and in doing that, they didn't just build a better circus. They created a whole new form of entertainment. They made the traditional circuses completely irrelevant to their success. So how on earth did they pull that off? They did it through something the book calls value innovation. And this is the core of the whole strategy. For decades, business school taught you that you had a choice. You could either be premium and expensive, or you could be basic and cheap. Value innovation completely shatters that idea. It's about chasing after two things at once, making your product better and cheaper, creating this huge leap in value for your customers and for your own company.
And the results, well, they kind of speak for themselves. A major study of business launches found that while these blue ocean creations were only about 14% of the total efforts, they generated a staggering 61% of all the profits. So that tells you that while sailing into uncharted waters might seem risky, the payoff, wow, it can be absolutely astronomical.
Okay, this all sounds great in theory, right? But how do you actually find a blue ocean? Well, the book gives us a really practical map for this journey. It's a tool called the 4 Actions Framework. This framework basically forces you to rethink everything about your industry by asking 4 really powerful questions. First, what are the things your industry just takes for granted that you can completely eliminate? Second, what things have been way over-engineered in the race to compete that you can reduce? Third, what compromises are customers being forced to make that you could raise the standard on? And finally, the most exciting one, what completely new value can you create for your customers that's never been offered before? Let's look at Yellowtail Wine. They dove into the super intimidating US wine market, not by trying to impress wine experts, but by appealing to pretty much everyone else. As you can see, they eliminated all that complex, fancy wine jargon. They reduced the overwhelming number of choices, down to just 1 red and 1 white. They raised the sense of fun and approachability, and in doing all that, they created a totally new category. A simple, easy-to-drink wine for people who normally drink beer or cocktails. I mean, talk about a massive audience the wine industry had just completely ignored. That right there is a blue ocean. Now, coming up with the strategy is one thing. But as anyone who's ever worked in a company knows, execution, well, that's where the real challenge is. A brilliant idea on a whiteboard is completely useless if you can't actually bring it to life inside your organization. The book points out 4 major hurdles you're almost guaranteed to face internally. First up is the cognitive hurdle. Your own team is just so stuck in the status quo, they don't even see the need for a change. Then there's the resource hurdle, that instant assumption that any big new idea requires a massive budget. Next, the motivation hurdle, getting your key players actually energized and bought into this new direction. And finally, maybe the trickiest of all, the political hurdle, dealing with the powerful insiders who have a vested interest in keeping things exactly the way they are.
Now, it's really important to understand this isn't the only school of thought out there. Critics, including the legendary strategy guru Michael Porter, would argue that no ocean stays blue forever. Eventually, competitors are going to follow you. They argue that you just can't ignore the fundamentals of competitive advantage. And it's a powerful reminder, right? Creating a new market is just the beginning of the journey. It's definitely not the end.
All right, so let's boil all this down to 3 key takeaways. First, the goal isn't just to beat the competition, it's to make them irrelevant. Second, the engine that powers all of this is value innovation, that simultaneous pursuit of being both better and cheaper. And third, that 4 actions framework, that is your practical, hands-on map to get there. So I'll just leave you with this question to think about. In your industry, in your job, in your projects, what would happen if you stopped obsessing over what everybody else is doing and you focused all of that energy on creating something truly new, something uncontested? What blue ocean is out there just waiting for you to discover it?